All right, let's open up a pretty unique clinical file today. We're not just looking at a study of the body or even the mind. No, this is a deep dive into consciousness itself, which in this case has been diagnosed as a kind of profound sickness. We're going to explore two very different potential cures, two totally opposing philosophies, the logic of zero and the logic of one. Now, this quote, this is the bedrock, the foundational principle for the entire clinical mission we're about to dissect. The whole idea is pretty radical, right? What if the ego, the very thing that makes you you, isn't a sign of vitality, but is actually a terminal disease, a fever that desperately needs a cure? That's our starting point. So, our examination doesn't even begin with a person. It starts with a city. The investigator in this file treats the entire city like a crime scene, a collective being that's suffering from a fevered soul. The whole point is to peel back the layers and expose the decay that's hiding right under the surface of our modern world. The diagnosis for this city is what's called an architecture of stagnation. Just think about that. The very environment is like a maze designed to loop back on itself, trapping everyone inside a cycle of just performing, playing roles that, in the end, lead absolutely nowhere. And this brings us to our patient profile, the stargazer. This is the archetype of the modern soul trapped in that city. The stargazer is desperately trying to manufacture meaning where there is none. Performing these empty rituals for a sky that just doesn't care. This leads to something called the Pharisees paradox, where you have this perfect exterior of virtue, but inside, everything is rotting. The performance, the mask, it becomes a shield against the pain of just existing. So, how do you treat a terminal illness like this? Well, it's not about traditional therapy. The case file calls the method something else entirely, the unmaking procedure. It is a precise, almost surgical dismantling of the self. Now, this procedure isn't just random cruelty. It's clinically rooted in the Freudian idea of thanatos, the death instinct. The thinking is that this isn't an act of malice, but a response to a natural pull that exists within all life. This deep, unconscious desire to go back to the peace and quiet of an inanimate state. It's framed as the ultimate therapeutic release. To get this process started, the investigator initiates what's called the wild hunt. And no, it's not a literal hunt. It's a controlled, systematic application of incredible psychological pressure. It's designed specifically to shatter the patient's comfortable, but ultimately false reality. The tools used in this hunt aren't physical, they're symbolic. You've got the ebony clock tower, which is this constant, ticking reminder that time is running out. Then there are the watchful ravens, making sure that psychological pressure is everywhere, totally inescapable. And finally, the verdant dragon, which acts like an internal mirror, forcing the stargazer to see every single one of their self-deceptions all at once. Just imagine the clarity and the agony of that. So, as this procedure moves forward and the patient's ego starts to fracture under the strain, a new figure steps onto the stage. He isn't the doctor. He's a catalyst, a necessary ingredient for the final phases of this unmaking. He is the Duke of the Abyss. Now, if the investigator, the Red Spectre, is the clinical, calculating mind behind all of this, kind of like a cosmic superego, then the Duke is something else entirely. He's the raw death instinct given a physical body. He is the living embodiment of that unconscious pull towards non-existence we talked about. And this is his entire philosophy, the logic of zero. See, from his perspective, destroying an individual isn't evil. It's a cure. In fact, it's the only way to end the fever of the soul and get back to the perfect equilibrium of the grand silence. But what if the patient survives this? What if their ego shatters, but something is left behind? They don't just dissolve into nothing. Instead, they enter a crucible, a trial by fire designed to forge a completely new and much stronger kind of mind. This road to sovereignty follows a three-step transformation, very Nietzschean. First, the spirit becomes the camel, learning to carry the crushing weight of reality without any illusions. Then it transforms into the lion, violently tearing away all those false values and masks. And finally, if it succeeds, it emerges as the child, a new creator, someone who can actually generate authentic meaning from scratch, out of the void. So the unmaking procedure is finally over. The patient has been stripped bare of their old self, and now a final prognosis has to be determined. But here's the thing, it's not the physician who decides, it's the patient. The investigator presents something called the Crimson Gift. This isn't a physical object, it's a choice. A final, definitive decision that will seal the patient's fate and really answer the question of what the true cure actually is. So here they are, the two paths, the final choice between two completely opposite cures. On one side, you have the logic of zero, offered by the Duke, a peaceful, therapeutic release into total nothingness. On the other side is the logic of one, the incredibly difficult path of sovereignty, where life itself, with all its pain, becomes the cure for its own sickness. So, after every single non-essential part of who you are is burned away, a choice remains. Is the real cure for the sickness of consciousness found in its extinction or in its radical, painful recreation? This clinical file, well, it doesn't give us an answer. It leaves the final prognosis up to the patient. And, I guess, up to you. Which path is the cure?